What kind of things did you have to learn to become a good manager for a residential service company?
The biggest thing for me, Roger, was that I had to do it and see where I failed, apply for the position and become that person and then realize where my shortcomings were and make sure that I understood and I was okay with failing at it, and then having the right mentor, obviously being able to speak to people transparently and create a thick skin. That way I can have real input, real feedback and be able to adjust, on the move.
I've got plumbers that have worked for me. And me and you've talked before about, making mistakes. An apprentice running into a building, different type things.
Right.
I had an apprentice cut a sewer camera head off. And, things like that happen. They make mistakes. When you're managing people, you still make mistakes, don't you?
Oh yeah, for sure.
A lot of people think once you're in management that there are no more mistakes. You don't make mistakes. You're perfect. You do everything right. But to be honest, we're still learning because everybody learns different.
Mm-hmm.
Each person under us learns different. What's one of the biggest mistakes you made as a manager?
Well, the biggest mistake I made as a manager was having people literally walk out of meetings. I've always been real comical, so I like to kind of cut up and have a good time while I'm also trying to teach some real life stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one time where I had a plumber, who literally just got up and walked out of the meeting. And after the meeting was over, I went and met with him, and he looked me straight in the face and said, "You can't talk to people like that." Not realizing that I was just joking and kind of cutting up. And at that point, I realized that, okay, I need to think about this a little differently and learn each individual person, who they are, how they act, what makes them tick, and then manage each individual person as an individual, not as an organization.
I love that because I started studying personalities and communication styles and leadership and management. I've studied so many different things. But one of the things that I think helped me the most is PCM, process communication model. And literally it's what different personalities are people and how do you communicate with them? And I think that it's been great for me as a leader. Luckily, or unfortunately, really, I learned this too much later to help me with my plumbing company because everybody communicates and not just communicates, everybody speaks and receives messages completely different.
Right.
And we've got to learn how to do that. What do you think that you learned or what did you just think about that made you think, look, I need to look at this different? And I like the way you said it. Look, this guy came up and told me, and I thought, okay, wait, I need to change the way I do this. Is there anything particular you learned to help you get to that? Or did you just start looking at yourself, thinking about what you're doing?
The way that I actually approached it that day was I was recently out of my military career and I got so used to, I had been overseas. And so I got so used to everything being
a command.
Yeah.
You bet.
Do what you're told because I told you to do it that way.
You bet.
And if you don't, you could lose your life or your buddy's life. Right. And so with that being said, I went into this meeting first year as an operations manager, and it was, Alex told you to do it this way. This is the way of the world. We're going to do it this way. And after that, I took a step back. After that encounter, I took a step back and was like, whoa, I need to know what makes this guy tick. And actually that next day he transferred back to the satellite location that he came from. So I didn't have the opportunity to lead that individual anymore. But at that point, I really had to look at me, and I would, as I taught and as I managed, I would listen more to understand as opposed to finding out a way to answer a question right away. So if one of my guys asked me a question, instead of answering the question the way that I would have 2 years ago in the military, I answered it as two humans talking about a situation or an issue and the best way to approach that.
I love that. I studied Sandler sales training, and I put my entire plumbing company through it at the time. Whenever they call it sales training, I'm like, guys, look, this is not sales training. This is communication. Learn how to communicate with the people below you, the people above you, and the people you're working for. Meaning when you walk into a customer's house, they all speak different languages. And that's the way I kind of put it. is there's 6 really different base personalities. I became a PCM coach because I wanted to not just understand it, I wanted to understand it better than most people did. And that way, when it came to communication styles, I knew, listening to someone, okay, this is what they're looking for. This is the way they speak. This is the way they talk. This is the way they think. Tradesmen built America. Not policymakers or desk jockeys, but hardworking, blue-collared men and women. Join me, Roger Wakefield, on conversations with some of the nation's most successful skilled laborers. This is the Trade Talks. So before we go any further, tell everybody who you are and what you do.
My name is Alex Gonzales. I'm a master plumber in the state of Texas. Been doing plumbing since about 1996, and I've done everything under the sun. I've an apprenticeship. I've dug holes. I've sweat. Been yelled at and fights on job sites before. But my most current role right now is I'm back in the field. I've done leadership, management, some light ownership responsibilities, but I'm back in the field again now.
Okay. I remember I had a job. I got in the union and I went to work out at Texas Instruments. And I remember this superintendent who was over this building that I was in. And I walked in there one day and I wasn't happy about something. And he looked at me. He said, well, you're ruined now. He said, you can never go back in the field. And I looked at him and said, dude, don't ever think I can't go pick my tools up and do a better job than most of the people out there. And that's exactly the way I felt about it. But he thought, yeah, you're ruined. You've been in here in the AC. You have a cafeteria every day at lunch and break. And I'm like, yeah, that doesn't define me. I love going back in the field and getting my hands dirty. I love installing a water heater, going out and doing a leak detection, a slab leak, water leak, whatever it is. Stuff like that. I find joy in it. But let's go back and talk. How did you get started in the trades?
So growing up, I was a fairly good child. And then I hit high school and all that went out the window. I ended up dropping out of high school and went to work for my father during the summers. And at that point, I fell in love with the challenging side of things, the problem solving, and that was always huge for me because there were always things where people, growing up as a kid, people tell you, oh, you can't do that because I said so, or you can't do that because it can't be done. And so when I got older and I was doing plumbing, they're like, oh, well, it can't be done that way. Well, in my mind works. I'm ADHD, all that stuff. So my mind goes, okay, you told me it can't be done. I'm going to find a way to do it. I'm going to find a way to do it. And so that's exactly what I do, and I think that's probably what made me that's probably the best part about doing plumbing is the problem solving. Anybody can cut stuff out and put stuff in, but being able to diagnose it and understand how it works and what makes it work and why it's not working, and then correct that issue. That's where my heart is. That's my passion.
So you see, you quit school and went to work with your dad. Your dad was a plumber.
Yes.
Owned a plumbing company.
Yes.
Before you quit school and took that job, did you think, hey, I'm going to be a plumber when I grow up, just like Dad?
Not at all. Actually, when the Top Gun movie first came out back in the 80s, my mind was, he's cool. Tom Cruise he's cool. He gets all the girls.
A whole lot cooler than Dad is.
Yeah. Way cool dude. Flies these fast fighter jets and all that. So my whole life, my uncle was in the Air Force. And so I spent every summer growing up from about the time I was 8 until the time I was in my teens and going to Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport. The feeling you get in your chest when you get to see a fighter jet, an F-15 or B-52 take off is just like you're not even there, but the adrenaline is there. And so growing up, I was like, I'm gonna fly fighter jets. And then as I got older, I realized I was afraid of heights. And so I was like, that's not going to work out. And so that's when I realized that I needed something more me. And of course, I guess fate would have it, my father owned a business and I was able to just kind of fall right into that. And lo and behold, here we are 20 something years later, and I still have a passion for it.
Shout out to Harrison Underwood, my nephew, a fighter pilot in the Air Force. Keep doing what you're doing, brother. I mean, I never thought in high school I'd be a plumber. Never thought. I thought I'm going to play pro football. I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this. I was not going to school to go to college. I was going to school to chase girls. Thought I might play football. Probably should have. But I got in trouble. And man, I made a lot of stupid mistakes. So people that make stupid mistakes, trust me, there's a good career opportunity in the trades. But did you ever think about another trade? Or did you just think, look, dad's a plumber. I got a job here. This is what I'm going to be when I grow up. Or were you just thinking, look, I'm going to get a job so I got some money coming?
I like money. I like to have it. I like the feel of it. I like what it does, the comfort that it brings. Mm-hmm. And so, yes, I wanted the money at the same time, but I also knew that I didn't want to sit around the house and clean or, cut the grass, whatever it was. So that was an escape for that happening. I've done a lot of things, to be honest with you. I've done auto collision, paint and body. I took auto collision in high school. I've done auto mechanics, worked at Firestone, worked at some of the Ford dealerships in our local area here. And I love it all. I love working with my hands mainly. And so recently, within the last couple of years, I've actually looked into some other business adventures, things like I've taken on to cigars, so like cigars and whiskey. And so I've looked into some other business ventures. I got friends that own cigar lounges and bars and stuff like that. I've been very intrigued by that world. And so I've been looking into that as well. I've got a buddy of mine who owns a haircutting, I guess you would call them tools. They make premium scissors and shears.
Okay.
And so that I've thought about, okay, well, can I put a cigar lounge and a whiskey bar with a real life barber salon? Like, could that work? I've got some cousins that are doing adventures in things like haunted houses, year-round haunted houses. And so all these things have come to light within the last few years, but it always comes back to plumbing because, it's not new to me. And I know what the expectation is. I've done it for so long. I'm just so comfortable with it that if business ownership is in my future, then A, I would have to do a lot of other learning, but B, I already know the plumbing side of it. So I would just need to re-educate myself in the leadership, the ownership, the SOPs, those kinds of things, which luckily I've got a great network of friends that own their own businesses now too, that I can reach out to, to assist me in that process.
If you're enjoying the Trade Talks, hit that subscribe or follow button, which helps us produce this awesome blue-collar content absolutely free. And now, back to the episode.
I'm a plumber. Started plumbing in 1980 while I was still in high school. Ended up quitting high school, got into plumbing, went back, graduated with my class, came back, got back into plumbing, did a couple of other things in between, just small things. But once I got my license, I got out, became a cosmetologist, became a bartender, became a bouncer, became a bodyguard, a restaurant manager. A lot of this stuff I did while I was still plumbing. The good thing about plumbing is, you can have a full-time job and you can still have evenings and weekends to go get behind a bar or, do security at a concert or whatever it is. But I always came back to plumbing because number one, the money's good. And don't get me wrong, I made great money doing a lot of different things, but the money in plumbing is always good and it's always consistent. I flew into Miami the other day. I think there were 20 tower cranes. And I'm like, yeah, things are booming here. Always look at that every time I fly into a town. But I always come back to plumbing. You've apparently tried other things.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you keep coming back to plumbing?
Number one, because I own all the tools. I've spent probably several life savings over worth of tools. And when I was managing for other companies, those tools would sit kind of dormant in the garage or whatever, in a storage unit, what have you. They really didn't do much for me. And I was relying on somebody else to generate my pay. And with being back in the field now I can kind of write my own destiny again. I'm not at the mercy of the people above me or the people beside me. Now I get to work shoulder to shoulder with my peers, learning and teaching and communicating and building relationships and creating friendships with not only outside people, but also people in my immediate circle.
Okay. So I want to go back to something you just said. I didn't want to allow other people to control my pay, but then you went back into the field where really you can make as much money as you want to make.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Explain that, because most people, when they hear that, they're going to think, wait, he went back into the field. So now he's an employee again.
Mm.
But as a plumber at a residential service company that owns as many tools as you do, as many tools as I do, has got a lot of plumbers that they own every tool that God ever made. How is it that you've been in management, and I hate to say it, but people control your paycheck, and you go back to the trades where you go back into the field on a truck where you really control your paycheck?
When I was in the field originally, before I had ever done any kind of leadership role, I was commission-based pay, so I was making money hand over fist, sometimes working with people that were less integral than myself or other people. And so I had to figure out, number one, what kind of plumber was I going to be? Was I going to be an ethical and an integral one? Or was I going to be the one that just chased the dollar? And what I found was that the one that had the most candor and the one that was the most transparent with the homeowners typically won at the end of the day. And so when I became an operations manager, those were the things I tried to instill in my team was A, we do it the right way every time, all the time. B, the customer's not always right. And there will be a time where their expectations are unrealistic and just won't work. And that's when you need to take that and route them down the path to success, if you will. And so at that time, I realized that some managers don't make a whole lot of money as a salary. They get their money from the incentives, your bonusing from the months or what have you, profit margins, gross margins, things of that nature. And so I started doing well. Then I went back into the field the first time. My sales dropped, but my conversion rate went up because now I could look at it from both sides. Because I saw the field side and then I saw the back end, the manager side, I can head the complaints off before they even started.
You bet.
And so like I said, my sales numbers dropped, but my conversion rate went up because my average ticket was more consistent. Then I went back into the field shortly after that as an installer. And because that was a commission-based program, Robert Renfro, he kind of led the charge on that.
Mm-hmm.
And we both did very, very, very well. And so Robert went on to do his own thing and I went on to do my own thing. And we both are doing very well. But my biggest thing during all that was, like you said, controlling the pay. Is in the field, you get to work as much or as little as you want.
Mm-hmm.
You get to take on specific tasks. If you are less experienced in that field, then it's easy to just pull back and call your manager or whatever and say, hey, I don't feel right about this one. I don't have the knowledge or the know-how, and find a way to correctly communicate that to your homeowner and bring those two paths together. But as a leadership role, you have two teams that you're on. And I learned this the hard way. You have your leadership team above you, and then you have your direct reports, your plumbing team. And you can't fight for one more than the other, because you'll get run over one way or the other. And again, I learned that the hard way. And that's why I went back in the field, was because it was too much to try to juggle. One team demanded more of your time than the other, and the other team didn't like that as much. And, it's kind of like having stepchildren and regular children. So
got to treat them all the same. Yeah. It's funny because I learned that in the union. I became a salesperson, and, they say a lot of people, it's hard to come out of the field and do sales because you're always looking at everything in the field. But one of the vice presidents of the company, I would go out and sell an amazing job and come in, our estimators be like, yeah, we really don't even want to look at this. It's like, what? It's like, guys, do you understand? We do this very well. But one of the vice presidents called me in the office one day and says, Roger, you have two sales jobs. First of all, you've got to sell it to the customer, but then you have to come in and sell it internally. You've got to get people on your side. You have to sell them in and let them believe, look, we can do this and make money. Mm. Don't just come in, throw it down and say, guys, look, we got this job, throw a number to it. Because they're like, we don't do this kind of stuff. You've got to explain your background and your leadership and what you can do. And I thought, wow. So I love that you put that. You don't just work for the guys in the field, you work for the guys in the office too. Mm-hmm. And it's a very fine line in between them. Let's go back to being an apprentice. What did you learn along the way that wanted to make you become a really good tradesman?
Obviously, being an apprentice, you growing up old school, not the new school apprentices where they have more accessibility to things. I call it school hard knocks. So when I was an apprentice, you were in the sun, the rain, the sleet, the winds, whatever, and you were digging, you were mixing concrete by hand, you were pushing, pulling, or the whole 9 yards. I knew that
stuff will wear a man out nowadays.
Yeah.
At least that's their mindset.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. I found out real quick that that's not the life I wanted to be a part of for a long period of time. Also my ADHD, so when I was digging, if I was done digging, I would go find something else to do. A lot of times it was not probably what I should be doing, but, wandering out into the field or something, because again, I was, probably 12 years old, 13, 14 years old doing that. And we didn't have cell phones in our pockets back then, beepers weren't even a thing. So you didn't have any of that stuff. So you found other stuff to do, throw rocks, kick dirt, whatever it was. And I knew in the back of my mind, I knew that if I stayed at it long enough, I could make something awesome out of it. But at the same time, I knew that if I stayed in that one position too long, the world might pass me by. And that's when I decided that it was time to go to the next level. And so as soon as the tradesman license came into effect, became active, I jumped on that train.
I remember always watching the superintendent think, man, I want to be a superintendent. He sits in the office. He's got AC. He doesn't do anything. He just sits in there all day. And, I'm out here doing all the work. And I remember my first superintendent job, I had 10 times as much work as I'd ever done before.
Oh, yeah.
Numbers and ordering and labor and tools and material. And man, it's a never ending thought.
Mm-hmm.
It's continuous. What do I have to do now? What do I have to do next? To move up into a good leadership role with your dad's one thing, because it's a safe spot. It's a company. I'll say that. Randy tell you it's not safe working for your dad. It's a safe spot because look, you've been there, the systems, you understand dad, how he thinks. But then to go out and go to work for another company as not just a plumber, but as a service manager, an ops manager, even a team leader. What were your big aha moments? What were you like, wow, this is what I've got to do to be really, really good?
When I went from the field to my first operations manager position, I had that same mentality. You get a company truck, it doesn't smell like wax rings and dumped over glue box containers. I pushed really hard to get to that position. And then when I got there, I was like, okay, cool. I'm here. I get to wear the blue button down shirt and the jeans tucked in and the nice belt and the boots. I think my outfit cost more than the tools I had on my desk.
Completely get it.
And literally like the first week it was Cadillac, right? It was sit back and enjoy it, put the cup on the table, watch the computer, have lunch with the wife. And then that next week is when it really kicked in. When you get your phone call from your AVP or your VP or your president, whatever, and now they're wanting to talk to you about next year's budget. Okay, let's talk about next year's budget. Where do we got to be? Let's talk about your materials. Why is your material cost so high? Why is your labor cost so high? Why do we have so many callbacks? All these things. And I was just like, okay, hold on one second. Like I didn't sign up for this. I signed up to kick back and wear a button down shirt.
You bet.
Cadillac.
I wanted the easy job.
That's right. That's what I wanted. And then it became clearly evident that that was not the case. And at that point I thought, maybe this wasn't a great idea.
When reality kicks in, it kicks in hard.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
I remember working for a superintendent, probably one of the best superintendents I ever worked for. We were doing a big hospital job and he could literally look at a blueprint, pull out a sheet, because we talked earlier, you and I, about all the things you've got to do to prepare either a department or a company or whatever it is you're doing. This superintendent prepared every job that way. He would literally have a set of blueprints. He could go to a notebook that he had already put together, give you the complete takeoff for that notebook, tell you how much labor was to be spent on every system on that blueprint. And I mean, he had this notebook and I mean, it was his lifeblood of the job. And I remember seeing that because it's like, I'd come in the office and say, hey, we're getting ready to move this area here. I'm going to I'm going to come in and do a takeoff. I want to get the materials together and do this and this. And he'd literally just go open his notebook and slide it over. And he said, there it is. It's like, you've already taken off this whole floor. He's like, yeah. Not only that, I've broken it out into the area you're going into. So how much labor do I have? Because I'd always do the material takeoff, then I'd go through and labor it and compare numbers. And he's like, you've got, 837 and a half hours. Dude, how do you know this? And he taught me. He's like, look, you take MCAA labor, you do this, you do this, you do this. I think the companies that do well in service do that all the way down to every single job they go on. If you send me out on a job, when I'm done with it, you or somebody you've got or systems and processes these days, I know the software is out there to do it. Hey, Roger was on this job 2 hours. This job was bid at a 1.5 hour project. Roger lost $43.75. Or it's just the opposite. Roger got the job done in an hour and a half. It was $2. It was a 2 hour job. He got it done in an hour and a half from the time he got the call to the time he rolled away. He profited $143.75. Are all the companies going through and looking at each average ticket like that every single day or no?
Maybe in the bigger companies that are bigger contracts, but the most positions that I've ever held and been in tune with those types of things, no. Labor and material will kill a company really fast. It'll sink organizations. So having a good number and knowing a good round figure where you need your labor margin and your material margin there, like knowing what that is important. As far as are we chasing the 0.1% or the 0.2%? No. Most of the time what it is its jobs are underbid, I think, personally, because, you try so hard to land the job, you forget what exactly it is that you're working for, so, but as far as the money goes, no, most residential companies don't look at it like that. The last 4 that I've worked for, no. They look more at the underlying, the bottom line, where's your margin at?
Right.
Your gross margin, your net margin, and your profit margin, those 3 things. And if any of those are out of whack, somebody's going to be asking you questions about it.
I've been a part of some really, different best practice groups. Some I think were okay. I've talked to some I think are phenomenal. You've been involved with some of the training in some of them. What do you think about best practice groups? Do you think the companies that utilize them well do good or do better because their employees learn more of a right way to do things? And don't get me wrong, best practice groups aren't cheap.
I think they are a great way to get comfortable with operating a business. If your brain does not work at that magnitude, then it's always a great idea to have somebody to help you look over those things. I can tell you, I've been on multiple phone calls with a best practice group. The person that I'm on the other line with is in Connecticut or what have you, and I'm in DFW. And they're going, well, your numbers for this are off and your numbers for this are off and this and that. And I'm going, well, you're 2,000 miles away. How do you understand what my market looks like or what type of season we're in right now or how big my company is and all that? But I also understand that there are statistics involved, where they got to look at, they're looking at 3 years worth of flow chart or org charts or statistics in that company, in that marketplace, in that demographic, doing the same thing, and they're seeing an increase or a decrease. And at that point, you have to really look back at your management style, your leadership style, B, your employees. What are you doing or not doing? That I had just kind of, to squirrel this real quick. I had 3 pro presses come up missing. You're talking about $18,000 worth of material, right? Worth of equipment right
quickly.
There. Oh, gone. You have to replace that equipment. So if you were profiting that for the, let's say, month of October, if you were profiting, you were looking good. And now you have 3 pieces of expensive equipment you got to replace. Well, guess what? Your margin is now gone or drastically reduced because now you have to calculate that in. So those numbers and those groups are important because they help you find little tips and tricks, A, to know those numbers, B, to calculate those numbers, and C, how to track those numbers. Tracking it is the most important thing,
Mm-hmm.
but being able to do that and being able to have your mind work in that fashion is where those groups come in most, I think.
If you were starting your own company today, what 3 or 4 or 5 things do you think you would need to know, things you would need to have in place, and what KPIs would you track from the very beginning?
One of the best practices groups that I was a part of had this exercise, and it was a 1 truck exercise. I'm sure everybody's done it. Everybody's heard of it.
You bet.
I truly enjoyed it because I had Robert Renfro on my team, and he and I were working through this, and we're going, yeah, we need our truck. We need maintenance. We need gas. We need insurance. We need, not profit, but payroll. We need all these things. And the group beside us, and they're younger generation kids.
We just need a truck and an iPad and tools.
That's exactly. They want a truck. They want an iPad or a tablet. And they're down the road. Me and Robert, when they called us, we're like, oh yeah, we need $2.4 million for this and that. And then the group next to us is going, we need about $37.83 in a pack of Red Bulls. Yep. And I'm like, hold up. The business don't run that way. Those are the things you need to know opening your doors. I remember a conversation that Dustin and I had a while back, and he told me, he said, man, I sold everything. I sold everything so that I could pour my entire heart into this. And that's tough for some people, being able to put so much trust and energy into that to make sure that you succeed right out the gate. And so that's awesome. From a KPI perspective, your key performance indicators, you have to know what margin you want to be. You have to know where your labor needs to stand, where your material needs to stand, but you also need to know how many hours a day are you running? How many calls a day do you need to run? How many employees are you going to have? How many business days there are in a month? All those things kind of play into that.
A lot of companies today, a lot of young people want to start out with a company where they're already hiring people. They're like, hey, I'm starting a plumbing company. I've got 3 plumbers here ready to go. I've got 3 trucks. I'm all fully stocked. I've got this. I remember talking to Robert Melko, one of my coaches and mentors out of Chicago. And he said, to stock a truck, writes $100,000. That's to buy the truck, to stock it, to get the right tools, right materials, get everything you need on it. It's $100,000. And when I hear these young guys say, I'm starting with 3 trucks and 3 plumbers, I'm like, well, you've already invested $300,000. That's not counting any overhead of building a warehouse, a garage at your house, whatever it is. Tools. I'm looking up at all the Milwaukee tools up there on top of the safe. Backup tools. A Pro Press goes down. Do you just go buy a new one then? Do you have one ready to go? If you knew someone right now that works for another company, let's go back to me. I was working for a company and decided I'm in a wrong spot. I'm at a bad company. I'm at a company that doesn't do things right. They're not doing things ethically. And I want to walk away. So I'm going to go start my own company, which really wasn't even a thought at the time, but I did. Would you start by hiring people? Would you start by doing it yourself? If you knew me the day I walked out of the union and I said, Alex, I'm going to start my own plumbing company, what all would you tell me I need?
The first thing you would need is to make sure that you had all of your business practices in order.
I had nothing in order.
Yeah.
Didn't know anything about them.
Absolutely. Most of the other companies I worked for, they call it a vision board. Put on the board, put it on the wall, make it real. If it's not written down somewhere, it's not real, it's not legible, you can't see it, it doesn't exist.
Wish.
Yeah, exactly right.
You bet.
And I think that's probably the most important thing is conversation you and I had earlier today. You said you got to know exactly where you're going and how to get there. And then you got to make sure you follow it, because if you steer away from it or you get swayed away from it, whatever the case may be, you're going to end up at a stoplight that you never intended to be at, So it's really, really good advice. I would say you need to know everything about everything before, from who your vendors are going to be to what kind of truck you're going to drive to, how much you think the maintenance is going to cost. There are people in this world that, matter of fact, DFW that I know that do those types of analysis. One of the largest companies in our Metroplex here I worked for, and they do that. The day that you go through like a 3-week training process, and the day that they put you in a truck, you literally have a binder of everything that is on that truck, for every fitting, every screw, every piece of equipment, down to the tire pressures. And when you get to that last page at the back and you sign your name across that line, if anything on that truck is missing, wrong, broken, and they don't know about it, guess what?
Yep.
It's coming out of your pay or whatever the case. Maybe you lose your job. Who knows? But that's all super important stuff. Are you going to sweat copper, or are you going to press copper? Are you going to use PEX, or are you going to use Uponor? Because all those pieces of equipment are expensive. You got to figure that out.
When I started my own company, I knew nothing. Didn't even know what KPIs were. I literally just, Michael Gerber, one of my first coaches, first mentors, I had the entrepreneurial seizure. I'm working for a company. I'm running probably $35 million a year. And I'm thinking, man, I'm making these people a lot of money. I need to go open my own company where I can do that. And then whenever I found out they were getting into service, and I thought it was very unethically the way they were doing it and what they were talking about, I thought, you know what? I don't want to be involved with a company like this. But I've got a quote too that I tell people based on what you said a while ago. If you don't know where you're going, any road will get you there. I mean, if you don't know where you're going, just take off. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Just go.
You'll be right where
you're
at.
Turn where you want to turn. Yeah, you'll be right where you are. But if you know where you want to go, hence where do you want to be in 1 year? Where do you want to be in 3 years? Where do you want to be in 5 years? And does your 1 year plan align with your 3 and your 5? Is it going to get you to where you want to go? And in my old office, I used to have, papers up here with quotes on them. And, one of the big ones is focus. But another one is what you're working on right now helping you get to where you want to be. And that's what I always try to come back to, because, if you're starting out in the trades and you're spending your weekends video gaming and your evenings video gaming, is that helping you really get to where you want to be? Because to me, there's enough. Look, we didn't have access to YouTube, social media, knowledge the way that I think kids do today. If we want to learn about plumbing, we had to go all the way down the library and rent a book or spend time at the library and stuff like that.
Look through the Rolodex.
Which I'm quite a bit older than you, so you had a little better access than I did. It's so easy today. Kids ask me today, they'll reach out to me and say, look, I want to learn how to do plumbing. It's like, man, you're in a great spot. I talk about it all day, every day. And I think that helps them out. I would have loved to had something like the kids have today. But I always go back to, and I try to teach kids, we talked about this when you got into plumbing, started with your dad. There's service, there's new construction, there's residential, there's commercial, there's industrial, there's remodeling, there's union, there's non-union. When you started, did you know what kind of plumber you were going to be or where you were going to go?
No, not at all.
And your answer was no, just like mine, just like almost everybody I've had in here. So now one of the things I do on my YouTube channel is I try to teach people. And this is over on Roger Wakefield, the other YouTube channel, not the Trade Talks. But I talk about that. I explain the difference between commercial and residential, service and new construction, union and non-union. I just knew I was going in to be a plumber. And once I got my license, I quit learning. I just plumbed. I was a good plumber. I was a foreman and moved up to superintendent and different things, but still, I wasn't learning anything. I was just being a plumber. Now, a lot of things I did learn that helped me move up and get better positions, but to open your own company is a completely different mindset than it is as a tradesman or a journeyman, somebody in the truck that has that guaranteed paycheck coming in every week. But I tell people when they first start out now and explain all those differences, always think about your end goal. Where do you want to be? Do you want to grow up and say, look, I'm a superintendent at one of the biggest plumbing companies in town. I've been there, done it. It's a great gig, made great money, moved up to director of operations. Again, it's a great gig. I'm running somebody else's company, making money, putting them in position to get jobs done on time, under budget, and safely. But if your end goal 5 years from or 10 years from now is to own your own business, are you just doing this job? Or are you learning the things to help you run your own business one day? I talk to kids getting in the trades. It's like, look, always think about your end game. Where do you want to end? And to me, one other thing that I teach about now for people starting their own business, build a business you don't want to sell. Because if you're doing it so good that you don't want to sell it, you can ask a lot more money for it.
Right.
Because like, hey, look, I really don't want to walk away. I talked to you about a lady in Oklahoma talking about selling a business, doing 40% profit. I'm like, don't sell your business. You're already beating the odds. You're doing great. What is out there in your mind that plumbers can work on and focus on to help them move up, to higher levels, either as a foreman, superintendent, ops manager, whatever it is, or maybe move up beyond that and own their own company one day?
I would say invest your time, invest your time in where you fall short. Somebody, Dustin, I use Dustin because he's just so inspirational with everything he's done. And he said, when he and I were working side by side several years ago, he said, I realized what I didn't do or couldn't do. And I went and studied and read and talked and listened. And because he'll admit he was a bad communicator. He could not communicate with customers very well. So what did he do? He went, he studied, he read, he talked, he met people.
Read books and listened to books.
Absolutely.
It's huge.
And when he and I were working together, he was probably one of the best plumbers that were there because every customer loved him and he could do anything and everything. And what he couldn't do, he said he couldn't do, which was very little. Invest your time. If you have, like you said a minute ago, if you have time to spend 3 hours video gaming, yeah, if that's your downtime, that's your decompression time, great. Do an hour and a half decompression and then do an hour and a half of self-improvement. Do something to get you where you need or want to be. And I'm going to take a page out of that book starting this weekend, do that kind of stuff for myself as well. Cause I do occupy my time, my spare time with other things that aren't really going to help my future, for the conversation we discussed. If you got time to kick back and relax or those kinds of things, invest just a little bit and it'll take you to the next level.
Yeah. I'll tell you what, and I'll give all y'all a super huge tip right here. I used to listen to country music on the way to and from work. I used to work at DFW Airport. I would drive an hour each way. We started at 6, so I'm leaving the house at 4:30. I used to have to get up at 3:30 or 3:30 in order to work out. And because to work out before I went to work, leave the house at 4:30. That way I was there at 5:30 because I'm there before everybody. I'm the superintendent. I'm in charge of it and I'm never late. So I'm like, look, if I have a flat, I can still change it and be on time. It's the way I look at the world. But it's really funny because I used to listen to country music. You play country music backwards, you get your dog back, you get your wife back, you get your money back, you get your kids back, you get your job back. And I'm listening to Jim Rohn one morning, and that literally is probably what woke me up and just changed my world. I started listening to people like Les Gray, Earl Nightingale, so many people that were talking about things I'd never thought of. I remember the first time I sat and listened to the Think and Grow Rich TV movie, whatever it was on Facebook. And I listened to this one book and I'm like, this just changed my life. We'll never look at life again the same because life is either what it does to us or what we make happen. Okay. And my parents never taught me that. My parents, they both had jobs. They weren't entrepreneurs, although they did teach swimming lessons in the summer. They would run a business where they could make extra money and did great at it. But they both had jobs. My dad had a job for 40 years. That was his mindset. Get a job, keep it forever. Things have changed a lot. We look at jobs different, especially with the younger kids. But when I started listening to things, and Jim Rohn talks about it a lot, improve yourself. Don't get better at your job. Become a better person. That's going to make you get better at your job. That's one thing that tradesmen don't know and realize and understand is we have the ability to be whatever we want to be. I've got it in my wristbands. Blue collar workers are the original thought leaders. Look at the world around you. We built, we repair everything there is. It's us. It's our world. But we're looked at as stupid. We're looked at as uneducated. People look at us and say, look, if you don't go to college, you're never going to amount to anything. And it's like, I hate to tell you, but that's not necessarily true.
Right.
But that's the stigma. That's what's believed about being in the trades.
If you're enjoying the Trade Talks, hit that subscribe or follow button, which helps us produce this awesome blue-collar content absolutely free. And now, back to the episode.
And when I started listening to these speakers tell me, look, it's just your mindset. And when we're told that growing up, we believe it. It's what we hear. It's what the voices back in our head keep telling us. But I started listening to these people. They're like, look, if you want to make $100 million, you can. Dude, I'm just a plumber. You don't know me. But then when I start looking, wait, look what I've done in the short time that I've been doing social media. And this is just from me learning something new, being a tradesman. I tell people I got new tools in my toolbox. I learned to use new tools in a completely different way. But through coaching, through Think and Grow Rich, through The Richest Man in Babylon, through some different books, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, you learn that I can make whatever I want to make. God didn't say, look, I built Mark Cuban to be rich and Roger to be poor. I built y'all and gave you both gifts. Do with them what you so choose.
That's right.
And, we've talked about guys coming up through the trades, wondering when it's time to start their own business, how to start their own business. What do they do? And I go back to my first coach, Michael Gerber. And, you talk about come up with a whiteboard, come up with a vision. He did a thing called the dreaming room. I've actually still got the notepad here in my toolbox. And he says, write down your dream. Man, he gives you a bundle of Sharpies about this big, every different color there is. And they turn the lights down. They play some real relaxing music. And I sat down and filled out this thing. And due to time, I won't go into a lot of details on it, but I go up and present it to him. And he reads through it and he's like, wow, he said, this is good. Well, he had just crucified the guy before me. So, for me to go up there, I, believe it or not, I did it very willingly. But I went up there and he looked at this. He said, man, this is good. He said, how many of y'all think this can happen, y'all? Almost everybody, there's 30, 40 people in a room. Almost everybody raises their hand. He kind of hands it back to me and I get up off the stool and I grab it and go to take off and he's not letting go. And I turn back and look. And he said, there's just one problem. You got to fire the plumber. And I looked at him and I'm thinking about what he said. I said, but Michael, I'm the plumber. He said, I know. You can't be the technician, the manager, and the entrepreneur. If you're trying to divide all three, you're an entrepreneur trying to run a business a third of the time that's involved. If you're a manager, you're only managing a third of the time that it requires. If you're a technician, you're really only working a third of the day. It's hard to run a good business doing any one of those.
Yeah, agreed.
And man, when he said that, it literally blew my mind. And I was looking at myself thinking, how do I do this? But for the rest of that weekend, every time he'd get a doctor, a lawyer, a CPA up with that had a great business plan and idea and all that. Man, this is good. This is good. This is good. Roger, what do we got to do? Got to fire the plumber.
Yep.
Like you can't be the attorney and be the guy that builds out this training and education and market it and grow it and do it right. You've got to fire a plumber.
Yeah.
It's hard to me for a good ops manager and service manager to be a technician every day. There's got to be time to do both. But I also tell people when they first start their company, look, it's you. It's me. It's my butt in a truck running calls, then coming home and being the manager and trying to bill and invoice and collect and market and grow. And then the entrepreneur to get out and network and make sure everything's being done right and develop systems and processes so the next guy, it's easier for. But it gets down to one thing. The more we learn, the more we can grow. And that's why I asked you about moving up into management and leadership and what did you have to learn to grow and to do better? So let me ask you this. You're in a truck right now, but you've been management, leadership team and all that.
Correct.
What does Alex have to learn to grow to the next level?
I got to learn my direction. I gotta put it, like you said, it's got to be on paper. It's got to be on paper. I got to know where I'm going, what I'm doing, and how what I'm doing right now is going to affect the path to get me there. Because right now I feel like the work that I'm doing right now is I want to open my business debt free. No debt whatsoever. I want to pay cash for everything.
Oh, I did that, but I opened it without any money.
Yeah.
I was just like, okay, if we can make the phone ring, I can go buy stuff. I can go make money.
Yeah.
I didn't do it right. Now,
Yeah.
I had a lot of tools.
Mhm.
So I'm like you.
So, yeah. So what I'm doing now is actually working to be able to pay everything off so that when I ready to hit that door and ready to, actually put 100% energy into it, I'm not sidetracked or deterred by, auto car payment and, whatever it is, and then house payment. And then I don't have to worry about it. All of my energy and all my money and all my time can go into creating the best residential home, service company in the state of Texas. I used to work for a company a while back, my first big company, and my mentor at the time was the president of the company, and he was like, people loved him. He spoke everywhere. They wanted him to go everywhere and speak. It just his presence was known. And he said, I want to be a $1 billion a year company that just that just happens to specialize in residential service. And I was like, well, that's pretty smart, $1 billion a year company that is experts in residential service. And I was just like, that's cool, So take a little page out of that book.
Have you ever heard of Tommy Mello?
I've heard the name. I've not done anything with it though.
You need to listen to the podcast or watch the podcast that I did. He'll be a $1 billion a year garage door company.
Wow.
Garage doors. Great guy, but his mindset is always take care of your people. It's all about your people. If you could go back right now to the very first day that you walked out your door to go to work in the trades, to go to work with your dad. And I don't mean just helping him on the weekends, stuff like that. I mean, the day that you were out of school, quit school, and you're like, look, I'm going to work. I got a job at Dad's company. Knowing what you know now, what would you go back and tell little Alex that morning?
Full transparency, I would say do everything that you do with 150% and never second guess or question yourself. Because I think too many things and too many people nowadays, especially our younger generation, they come out of high school or they come out of college expecting to get $100,000 a year gig the first go, and they're being sorely mistaken. Their feelings are being hurt. They're getting upset, right? Because now people are looking for on-the-job experience. Mm-hmm. They're looking for real life, tangible training in whatever field it is, whatever it is. And like you hit the nail right on the head, Roger, earlier, back in our time, everybody was go to college, get a good job. And now the tradespeople were the staple in society right now. And everybody else is being replaced with robots, replaced with software, something along those lines. And we are in a space in time where you can't replace what we do, but with a robot or with a software, you can't do that. And so, I would say get out in the trade, start young, go 150% all the time, spend every waking moment you have honing your craft, perfecting your skills, making sure you have all the right tools in your toolbox, whether it's mentally, physically, emotionally, whatever it is, but do it 150% and keep pushing, keep moving forward. And don't be afraid, take the risk. You fail, so what? You're going to fail. That's the way it works. So
allow yourself to fail.
Mm-hmm.
If you could go back and talk to yourself that day too, knowing you had just quit school, would you do it again?
I would probably do it a little more tactfully, little smarter. And I definitely wouldn't have waited so long to get my license. My big thing was I had about a 10-year span between my journeyman and my master, but I had my tradesman for probably 2 years before I got my journeyman. Then after that, there was a long break in between where I didn't know if I wanted to stay in plumbing, pursued other things, did other things. Really and truly back then, I was more interested in the money than I was my future, because you get the immediate gratification of being able to buy something.
Absolutely.
And now I look back and go, you know what? I can buy whatever I want, but is it really going to make me happy? No, probably not. Maybe for a few minutes, as riding down the highway with my hair on fire. But other than that, probably not. So I would definitely go back and tell myself to hone your craft, perfect your skills, and do everything you can to do best.